guys. So I realize I need to update my intro a little bit, considering one of those shows isn't going on anymore. But how's everybody doing tonight? It's been a lot the last couple of weeks. I'm really excited to see so many of you guys here for just a basic Q&A stream. Lots of stuff to announce. I'm gonna start, as I usually do, with what I'm not going to be talking about, which is all of the drama-related things. There's a channel in the Discord for those of you that are members to discuss all of the stuff that's been going down with Indica and Edward Butler and all of that. That is the space for that, not here. This is supposed to be, let's come together as a community for positive things. Like, let's talk about some engaging and interesting stuff. You guys can ask me personal questions. I have reserved the right to decline the answer if they're things that I'm not comfortable sharing, or if they're things about my partners. But as per usual, I'm going to prioritize super chat questions and those that started off from my Discord server initially, because I asked for a few starter questions. But I will be taking questions from the whole community. I also have one other sort of exciting thing to announce, and that is that the staff on the server, at least a few of them, and I have started a brand new subreddit for the Hellenist community from this server. It's meant to be an allyship space, so even if you're not a Hellenist yourself, you're still welcome there. It's r/common Hellenism, and it's in the description of this video and will be in the description of every single video coming out from now on. So if you guys are interested in that, there's been some controversy on the main Hellenism subreddit. I don't want to get into it, but over the past, there's just been some problems there. So I wanted to create a sort of new community space just for folks that may not necessarily feel like they fit in there, or for folks that are looking for a different kind of community experience. So if you all are interested in that, there's a whole bunch of starter topics there, and there's a community that started from the Discord that has already started some very interesting discussions, including one about recon and revivalism and eclecticism and kind of bridging that gap, which is absolutely well within line with the work that I do here. So I would love to see some more voices contributing in on that topic, and on the topic of things that make you think about the gods and how much you love them throughout your day, because I think that that's really cool. So with that in mind, Akeda already with the $5 super chat. Hello. Aaliyah Kai wants no drama tonight, so no questions about Melpomene. Ha! Ha! I see how it is. Okay. So with that in mind, I did ask for some starter questions, so I'm going to try to take these in order. The first one was, what role does a connection with the land play in Hellenism? How can one go about starting a relationship with local land spirits, river gods, and nymphs? So that is a question that I actually think needs its own whole edited video. The idea of sanctuary spaces and local spirits and local gods was very, very essential to Hellenism. Even the gods themselves frequently had localized epithets for areas where specific aspects of that god were honored in a specific geographical space. So the role of the connection to the land in ancient times was absolutely extremely pronounced. However, I don't think that that necessarily means that revived traditions have to exclude that aspect. You might not necessarily be able to reach a god using that name if you are not in that space. However, one of the things that we have learned from the study of epithets that I've looked into is that gods revealed epithets and aspects to people over time, and that some people actually had epithets that were specific to their own personal relationship with deities. Also, my buddy Patamasu, who came on last week for his interview, has talked about how specific geographical areas in his area where his temple that he serves is have been claimed by various deities because of being honored there. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've kicked out local spirits, because remember, deities are and spirits seem to be pluralistic. So there's no reason why a deity wanting to be honored in a specific geographical space necessarily excludes the natural sort of local spirits that were already being honored there. So I think that in terms of place, yes, for example, desert deity is going to be honored differently in a forest place, but I think that that's where the role of UPG and SPG comes in, and that's one of those things that we need to navigate as a community, because place is very important and has been historically very important to deities within Hellenism. So that is my answer. As far as starting a relationship with local spirits, river gods, nymphs, etc., reach out. I have talked specifically about the ways that deities and such were honored and offered to in ancient times in my How to Pray in Hellenism video and in my video on offerings. The spirits of a particular area belong to themselves. They don't belong to a specific tradition. They belong to themselves. Practices can belong to cultures and traditions. Spirits belong to themselves. And spirits have a tendency to communicate directly with people, which is how traditions start in the first place. If you believe, for example, as I do, that the gods and spirits are real and that they have engaged in reciprocity with us and that they communicate with us, then those spirits and those deities are going to communicate directly with us to let us know when they do and do not like things that we do to try to contact them. So if you try to reach out to local spirits and you get pushback, then that's a very different situation than if you try to reach out and you get a positive response. So I highly recommend attempt to reach out through the methodology of your own tradition and see what kind of response you get back. Don't be afraid to try, because if a spirit is unhappy with you, they will generally let you know, or you'll get radio silence, which is its own form of rejection, as it were. Atomic Skeptic asks, if you play D&D, what is your favorite class/subclass? Personally, I tend to play a lot of shamans and druids. Very different classes, but shamans are my absolute favorite class. I really enjoyed them in 4th edition, and I enjoyed them in 3rd edition. I don't play 5th edition, really. I playtested it, and I didn't like some of the changes that they made. So yeah, that's a whole thing. But shamans and druids tend to be the kind of classes that I play the most. All right, so let's see. Favorite fantasy books and series? Oh, good gods. Well, The Wheel of Time is probably one of my all-time favorite fantasy series. It does kind of trail off into being a little bit long, and sometimes the first book is a little bit hard to get through, but I really, really enjoyed it. My other favorite series is, and it's N.K. Jemisin. I'm gonna have to actually pull up the name of the series itself, but there was a book I think The 100,000 Kingdoms is the first book in that series, but that particular series by N.K. Jemisin that starts with The 100,000 Kingdoms is by far one of my all-time favorite fantasy series and authors in general. N.K. Jemisin's work is just fantastic, so I absolutely love that series. What are your favorite parts about knitting? Okay, so knitting is a whole thing. I started knitting partly to connect with deity, but also partly because I wanted to learn how to make clothing and such that could fit me well, because my body is a little bit strangely shaped in terms of things that you could purchase for my size. And that was one of the things that I loved to begin with, was that I could create the cloth directly, unlike sewing where I have to cut it and reshape it. I shape the cloth with my hands. But as time has gone on, I really enjoy the complexity of knitting and crochet and the sight of watching the cloth form underneath my needles as I work on it. I love the challenge of design, because that is one of my favorite aspects to knitting, is doing design work, either for myself or for others in commissions. So that is my absolute favorite part of knitting, is the challenge of the design process and the formation of the cloth underneath my hands as I'm making it, and getting to kind of see that and to transform these hanks of yarn into something usable and useful and beautiful. I especially love doing texture work, so things like lace and cables, my all-time favorite stuff. So favorite hobby. Udak, the answer is yes. By the way, for people just tuning in, there's 20 more of you than there was when I started. I've got a few starter questions from my Discord that I'm going through, so you guys can formulate questions in the side chat. I'll start tackling those as soon as I'm done with the starter questions from my Discord. So favorite hobby, that's a loaded question, considering the answer is all of them. I'm not sure if writing qualifies as a hobby, because I literally make my living off of it, whether you count my writing for my YouTube channel or my writing for my novels. But that would have to be number one. I think that knitting or crochet would probably be second, though I'm also a pretty avid gamer, and I kind of switch between the two as to which one I'm more interested in at any given time. Though I almost always have knitting needles in my hands, so I guess maybe knitting wins by technicality for the sheer amount of time I spend doing it. Have I ever used alpaca yarn? Yes, actually. I have a lovely pair of alpaca socks that I made, and I actually just got a real life commission referral from the coffee shop that I did a bunch of hats for somebody who wants me to do alpaca wrist guards and leg warmers. And that's the last commission that I accepted before all this crap went wrong. So that is very much something that I've done. Alpaca yarn is incredibly soft, but it's also very expensive. So this person definitely knew exactly what they wanted. Have you ever had the chance to either lead or be part of an in-person ritual? Not for Hellenism, no, but I have been a part of in-person pagan rituals in the past. Specifically, there was a coven in my area back when I was still a Wiccan, like years and years ago, like we're talking over a decade ago. And I did attend a Samhain ritual for that. So that was really, really interesting. It was open to the public, and I went and I actually wrote a college report on it. So that was interesting. I have never led an in-person ritual, though. What aspects or qualities of your practice would you say are eclectic or syncretic, if any? Eclectic-wise, the divination methods and stuff that I use at present are pretty eclectic. I'm still doing research on Greek divination methods from ancient times. Syncretic, I'm not sure how many aspects of my practice are syncretic in terms of modern day, considering I actually am a multi-traditionalist. I keep my Haida practice and my Hellenic practice pretty separate. But I would say that in terms of eclecticism, the majority of where you find eclecticism has to do with divination on my part, and also the way that I do prayer sometimes can be very off the cuff rather than always being specifically structured in the traditional way. Obviously, the way that we structure altars in the modern day looks very different than the way we did in ancient times. And there's obviously a different quality to a lot of the altars that, like ancient Greeks did, which, the way we did in ancient times is probably bad phrasing. The way that ancient Greeks did their altars, there were a number of different styles of altars. Quite a few of them would have wine and such poured directly on them and would be outdoors. So obviously my altar is technically eclectic or syncretic in the sense that the way that it's set up mirrors more of a modern practice, but I would say that that's almost more revivalist just out of necessity. So the majority of my own practices are at the minimum reconstructed. The majority of them are also revivalist, where they're sort of updated to the modern day. I guess technically an eclectic practice would also include showering before ritual or taking a hot bath instead of always doing carnips. Or sometimes I will pour a bowl of carnips over myself after a shower, or extinguish a large bundle of herbs or things in the bath to turn the large bathtub into carnips and take a bath before I do my ritual things when I worship. I also do morning and evening prayers, but you find that in works and days. So, all right, we're almost done with the starter questions. Let's see. Would you ever want to do a Greek skepticism wine rant? Okay, maybe only half joking. So the skeptics more or less just kind of called BS on everyone else. So I'm not sure if skepticism could exactly exist as its own stream in the sense of the philosophical tradition. But I could talk a little bit about skepticism and sort of skepticism, latent Christianity, healthy skepticism versus unhealthy skepticism, and mental health. And I could actually do a community stream on that sometime in the future, because I think that that is a very valid topic. And I think that sometimes community skepticism can border on unhealthy because of experiences that a lot of us have had with monotheists and with cults in the past. So I know that that can be a challenge. Last Discord starter question that came in before the start of the stream. Top 5 things you like about running an interfaith server. So at the risk of sounding like I'm kissing butt for the sake of it, the number one thing that I love about my server is actually the community itself. The members of my server, especially those that are particularly active, are absolutely wonderful. I love you all. The majority of you here are actually from the server. And it is an honor for the team and I to be able to run a space for you all. Our community server would not exist without you guys. That means the world to me that so many people have been able to put aside their differences and exist in such a positive and meaningful space. One of the other things that I really enjoy about running an interfaith Discord server is just the sheer amount of stuff that I've learned from you all. I may not respond in every single channel, but I do read a lot of the discussion that goes on just over time when I can, in between all the work that I do. And there are so many knowledgeable folks. There are even some classicists and people in college for the classics, and folks that are studying anthropology theology or like various branches of science. And you all really bring the information, the citations. It's wonderful. I love the discussions that happen, and I love all of the things that I've learned from you guys, because I really have learned a ton from folks from a number of different traditions, not just Hellenism, and on a number of different topics. You all have been very, very good at helping to keep me up on the news and such, as well. So that's been really, really wonderful. And I love the healthy way in which this community approaches topics like drama. Like, there is a discussion on the Indica controversy that's going on, where we have at least one person from India who's been addressing it and having conversations about it. There are a few other people that didn't necessarily want to get involved because of the harassment that's been going on Twitter and other spaces, so I understand. But the community has really come together to have a productive discussion on this rather than just mudslinging, and that is something that I value, that we've worked really hard to cultivate in this space. And I love the fact that so many people can feel safe to openly express themselves and to disagree and to have these discussions. So that has been wonderful. So just so you all know, I'm probably only going to be going for an hour or so, just because I'm still dealing with stomach pains and such. So I'm going to try to get to as many of these questions as I can tonight. But if I don't get to yours, just know that I am probably going to do another stream maybe on Thursday if I can. So if I don't get to your question now, I will save it. So let's see. Lakasena, I think I did actually answer this question about the traditional like spirits and such of the First Nations people when I answered the first question about the spirits of the land and such. So if you don't feel like your question got answered, feel free to ask a clarifying question. But I think I did sort of cover this one. So let's see. We have a $10 super chat from Tiralana. I hope all is well. Have you ever played the Darksiders games? If so, what did you think? I actually really enjoy the Darksiders games. I have not played the third one, but I did enjoy and play the hell out of the first two. I really, really thought that as much as they were sort of decried for being imitations of games that were popular in their genres at the time, and I've heard that the third one is no different, I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed my experience with the first two. So, like, I'm looking forward. I own the third one. I'm looking forward to playing it. So from Kay, from Heroes, do you want to lead a ritual? Asking for a friend. Yeah, actually, I would love to lead either an in-person or an online ritual. I've actually led 2 online rituals with Wolf from The Hold, who is a wonderful host, and I'm really grateful that he had me. The first one was actually his idea, and the second one was mine. I led one on Panathenaya, and I led one on Ganesia. And both of them were wonderful. We had amazing experiences afterward. The Ganesia one taught us a few lessons about talking about grief and such as a community, and kind of the focus we need to put on those discussions. But overall, it was a wonderfully positive experience. And the mod team has actually been having discussions on and off about potentially doing some rituals in the bridge starting sometime next year when things calm down a little bit for my schedule after we deal with all the basement flooding and the remodel stuff that's going down there and such. So, Sarcastic Tennisist says, how about using local symbolism for gods? Like if they're associated with animals that don't live in your area, like how people associate local herons with Toth because we don't have ibises. I think that as long as you are getting results from those, like, associations, the gods are flexible. If they were limited specifically only to time and place, then we'd have a very different set of responses. People would not be getting calls from all around the world. So it's very similar. Like I associate Apollon with crows and with Stellar's jays because they're both corvid, even though he's mostly associated with ravens in Greece. And I've noticed that I have not gotten any pushback whatsoever from him from those associations. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think, again, what's important in this is the response that you're getting from deity and from spirits and learning how to read those, which is discernment is itself its own skill. So let's see. I started seeing someone who identifies as gender fluid. I want to compliment their appearance, but I don't want to use beautiful or handsome. Any suggestions? I would ask them, honestly. Some people find those words to be gendered and triggering. Personally, I consider beautiful to be gender neutral. I know that a lot of the time pretty can sometimes be gendered, but beautiful to me is gender neutral. But I know that some people feel differently. So my best advice to you is communicate with your partner and ask them how they feel. out, like, it's just like pronouns and such, right? Like, you only know if you ask or if the person tells you. So if something's going to be traumatic for that person, then they can let you know what does and doesn't work for them individually, because we are all individuals. The way that I might feel about specific words might be very different than the way that other people feel. For example, my gender identity isn't near as dependent on pronouns as some folks are. It's far more dependent on the way that I physically present myself and the way that I act. My mannerisms change depending on my gender identity that day. And so people who know me very well can pick that up. But for people who, say, aren't seeing me on a camera or something, then it might not be as obvious. So I think that, congratulations on your relationship. I think that this would be a really good time to show that solidarity and support and have that conversation like, hey, this is new for me. I don't know how to compliment you. I don't know how to work on this, but I want to show you that I appreciate how you look. What kind of language are you comfortable with? What would make you feel validated in your own skin? And for some people, those particular words might not necessarily be that big of a deal. Some people want a balance of them. Some people have an aversion to one or the other. It really is personal. So, when you feel better, would you mind posting the book movie game recommendations somewhere in the server? The book movie game recommendations? Like, what do you mean? Like, just recommendations for things that I like? Can I get a little clarification there, Akeda? Let's see. Are you indigenous or Native American? Those mean the same thing when you're talking about being Native. And by heritage and culture, yes. In terms of registration, no. I am not registered with my tribe, but I do have Haida blood, and I was raised with some culture. So I also was raised speaking a little bit of the language as well. Carpathia of Lilim has a $5 super chat. So when you do rituals, do you do it to all the gods at once or just some of them, and how do you decide? This is actually a really excellent question. It depends on both the day of the week, the day of the lunar month, and my needs at the time. So the majority of the days of the month are not dedicated to a particular deity, or if they were in antiquity, we don't have that information anymore. So for the majority of the days of the month, I will call Hestia, Hermes, Athena, and sometimes Zeus. These are the deities that I honor basically every day. Hestia, of course, is first and last in any honoring we do at home. She gets the first and last of the offerings and libations. For the sacred days, I will honor the deity whose sacred day it is. So depending on the day, that could be Artemis or Apollon, or it could be Heracles. There are a number of other sacred days. If it's a particular holiday, I will honor the gods that were associated with that holiday and usually do something associated with it if I happen to pick up that it was a holiday. Not always. For Numania, though, I do a ritual to all of the household gods that I honor, specifically because Numania is the day in which those things were like renewed every year. For Triakas, I also honor Hecate, and I do offerings at a crossroads because I actually live right down the street from one. So I leave an offering of a portion of the dinner that I cooked that night at the crossroads because I can and because I'm capable of that, because there is literally a roundabout sort of island crossroads right down the street from where I live. So it's not very long of a walk to leave that there. And I leave an offering to her and the ancestors there for that every lunar month. So how did you first become drawn to Hellenism? I answered this on a previous Q&A live stream. You'll have to go through the other two to figure out which one it was. I want to say it was the 5K Q&A, but I might be wrong. I had a call from Athena, a sort of vision that happened when I got out of a float tank and was headed toward the shower after doing a float. I can confirm 100% I was not still in the float when it happened. And that sort of led me down the rabbit hole after sort of coming out of that incredible experience and realizing sort of two things. One, that it was definitely Athena, and two, that I was to build a shrine and start making offerings to her. And then I had no freaking clue how to do that. So after about 6 months of trying to prove that I was crazy and failing, I built my shrine and started learning how to make offerings. And that's what brought me to Recon Hellenism and to the research that I do for this channel, which originally started as just research for myself for reconstruction, because I was very clearly communicated to that that was what I was supposed to do. What is it about reconstruction as opposed to modernized eclecticism that clicks for you? I specifically got drawn to reconstruction by the specific divine experience that I had that I just described. There is sort of a value of tradition that I have being an indigenous person who learned some of these traditional things. Now, with reconstruction, there's also this value of we know these things worked in ancient times for a large group of people who contacted these deities. And so, because of that, there is some authority that is given to those practices. But there's also the need for monetization and updating, which is something like being adaptable and creative with these things has always been one of my talents. So, for me, I technically am a revivalist. I do some eclectic things. I do a lot of revivalist sort of updating of practices. Not all of the offerings that I give are traditional. For example, my honey cakes are not made out of barley flour. I actually make them completely gluten-free. And sometimes I've made them out of agave instead of honey because that's what I had around. You know, I've made biscuits like olive oil biscuits and such as offerings as well. So, like, I'm not a 100% stark specific reconstructionist, but I am more of a revivalist and I lean towards tradition because I see the value in it. And I really enjoy the process of researching and reviving those traditions for a larger group of people because I also know how expensive the materials are and how difficult they can be to parse. So I want to try to make that path more accessible to other people. J.E. Bagley says, I am in college and work. I really struggle to find time to do ritual. Any advice on finding time to practice? For me, what works best, because I, as you know, do this full time. I also have all of the crazy that goes on in my life, like, you know, the remodel and all the other stuff. I've got 2 careers that I'm running, so I completely understand being time crunched. For me, what works best is I set aside time either right before bed or right after getting up for the gods every day if I possibly can. And having just moved the ritual room upstairs due to the flooding in the basement, that's gotten a lot easier. But making that time every day at a time you know you're always going to be available, whether that's a time that's a physical time on the clock or a time that is based off of a trigger for a thing you know you do every day, whether it's eating lunch or getting up in the morning or right before you go to bed, say after you brush your teeth at night or something like that. If you can make that time and space for yourself daily, even if it's just for 5 to 10 minutes of prayers, it doesn't have to be a big production. It can be just a brief pouring of like a libation or a small offering, a part of your dinner or something along those lines. Like making that time every day to build the habit is the most important thing. It's telling yourself that this is a priority and making sure that it happens at a time that is reasonable. Now, the other big thing is not seeing it as a failure if you don't make that time, because the moment you start seeing things in black and white as success or failure, that's a really great way to talk yourself out of being successful in the future. So, but the big thing is finding something that you can tack on the idea of worship to that is consistent already in your daily life, just like building any other habit. So let's see. I'm looking through other questions. Do you have any tips on making carnips when you're in the broom closet? Is it possible to make it more modern, like not by not burning anything? Is it okay to not use seawater? I talk about in my video on miasma and purification, if you have access to sea salt or even just regular salt, you can make carnips with a prayer to Poseidon and a ballon. And that is a way to make sort of like salt water, because we have like most salt in the modern day is actually sea salt, whether it's labeled as such or not. So the salt water, I think, is the thing that would specifically be purifying. But also there's an argument for showers and such being purifying as well, because the thing that was said to make water purifying was the fact that it was running water. And sometimes river water was also used for like washing floors and other things during purification, depending on the location in Greece. So, like, as far as carnips go, you don't just have to use the match extinguishing method, which is the method that I use. You can also use, like, sprinkling salt in a water with a prayer to Poseidon, and that can be silent if you're in the broom closet. I'm newing to the community and I've been listening to your Xenia Bridge show where there'll be more episodes in the future. Perhaps if I do find another co-host, it might come back. I am doing a lot of solo live streams, but Jen and I are no longer working together due to creative differences. That happened a couple months ago. It's probably for the best for both of us. We've both like already sort of made our public statement about it and everything. But if I do find another co-host sometime in the future, that show might come back. But for right now, it's definitely on hold because I don't have another one. And my own ability to keep up with my own work has been a little bit intermittent with all the stuff that's been going on between the remodel that we need to redo downstairs to like clean up all of the damage from the flooding and the electrical work that was already going on. So let's see. You mentioned your favorite books. I'm guessing there will be more questions like that. Of course, I can just watch the stream again and write them down. Oh, okay, that's what you mean. Yeah, I could write something up maybe in the general chat or in video discussions if you guys are interested in that. Just shoot me a message over there sometimes afterwards, and when I'm feeling better, I will write up a list of some of my favorite games and books and movies and such. Can I identify some gods with things that aren't traditionally things they are identified with, but are something I identify with that are meaningful to me? I'm sorry if that doesn't make sense. So if you're talking about drawing your own associations with the gods, I've actually talked about how I feel like Hermes kind of rules over all things ADHD before. So modern associations, I also did a video defending SPG and Ares. The idea of Ares specifically dealing with things like mental health and PTSD and such, and I defended that in a recent video. So absolutely, drawing those associations, again, that is your relationship with deity. And as long as when you're discussing these things in the community, you make it clear that these are personal and not historical, then you're absolutely welcome to do that both in the community and in your own practice. This is a communication, like, people forget, and this is something that I stress every single video, every single live stream, anytime the gods are brought up. Our religions are pathways to building relationships with the gods. That is what they're for. That is what we're here for. That is what the call that all of us felt ultimately is. For those of us that are trying to build relationships with the gods, for those of us who believe in them, that is what religions ultimately are about. So when you're thinking about it that way, if you have personal associations with a deity, there's historical precedent for families having specific associations that were traditional only to them and epithets that were specific to individuals and to places. So the idea of modern people being able to build those associations for themselves is absolutely like reasonable, and more than likely we'll see new SPG emerging from communities as they're built larger and larger online, like the Ares and mental health SPG that we've seen, like the Aphrodite and Bees SPG, which originally, I guess, emerged from some interesting evidence that might not have been interpreted properly, but has sort of grown. We'll see a lot more of that emerging over time. So there were a couple of super chats that I was answering questions. So what is my fave food? So this is gonna sound a little stereotypical and maybe a little bit weeb, but I love noodles of all kinds, and I especially love making really amazing like vegetarian ramen of a whole bunch of different kinds. I tend to post lots of pictures of this in the vegetarian food modeling agency channel in my Discord server. But I love making like traditional soup bowls and noodle soups and like ramen. That is like my all-time favorite thing. So Avery says, new to the channel and love it. My first divine experience was Athena as well in a dream. What has your experience been with her communication? My experience with Athena has been that she has been a lot more direct than I've noticed some people tend to say. When she shows up in my dreams and such with communication, and it's very clear that it's her from the context and such, it's pretty damn clear to me exactly what I'm being asked to do most of the time. So like my experience of her has been that she's very direct and very business-like. There's a warmth there, but it's one that kind of has to be earned, and that her interests are usually quite clear, but I generally have to figure out the details. So that's been my experiences of her. She has influenced pretty much every aspect of my life since I started worshiping her as a primary deity. You know, keep in mind, I do worship all of the Teoi, and I do worship quite a few other gods. I worship Hygeia, for example, for health, and Asclepios. I worship a number of sort of lesser known epithets for some deities like Artemis. And I do have a couple of heroes that I honor as well. But with Athena and Hermes are the two main deities that I have additional shrines to. They have the most votives on my altar, and I have the most experiences with them. They are the ones that get the most offerings, in addition to Zeus, who gets offerings every day because Zeus. And my experience with her has been that she has transformed pretty much every aspect of my life and continues to do so. So, got any tips for college kids pagans practicing in the dorm? I can't have smoke or fire and don't always get to do food offerings either because I get my food at the dining hall. Libations are your friend. My broom closet video actually talks a little bit about non-smoke related offerings and votive offerings and devotional offerings. Devotional offerings and libations are going to be your best friend. I highly recommend checking out my votive offerings and devotional offerings video, as well as the video on the broom closet where I talk about things like travel altars. That's going to be a huge help to you, I hope. So let's see. Oh, I need to scroll back up because I accidentally started asking questions out of order, I realized. Let's see. I'm trying to find another. Oh, what does virgin mean in Greek mythology? Does it literally mean chastity or does it mean being unmarried? The answer is yes. It technically kind of means some combination of both because women in Athens, especially, were considered property. They were considered property of their fathers and brothers and then eventually their husbands. So if you slept with a woman, like if you, like assuming you here in the colloquial is a man, or if a woman was slept with, the man was considered to have committed a crime against the husband, brother, or father, not the woman themselves. So the idea of unwanted, trigger warning, by the way, because we're now talking about unwanted intercourse. The idea of unwanted intercourse was considered a crime against the man who was said to have guardianship over the woman. I talked about this in my Is Zeus a Predator video. So the answer there is that it was assumed that a woman is supposed to be chaste until she is married because of the way that like ownership and legal rights and such worked, which is part of the reason why I say we don't want to reconstruct the culture of ancient times. We're reconstructing the religion. And in some ways, those things can seem inseparable, but there are some things that are useful in the modern day and others that are not. And those are one of those things. How would you honor the gods if you are short on money? Devotional offerings. Devotional offerings are the way to go if you don't have a ton of money, if you're concerned about doing things like food offerings and such. Inexpensive food offerings are another really good way to go, especially if they're food you make yourself or portions of your meals and such that you reserve. But if you don't want to go with physical offerings, or if you don't have a lot of money for it, devotional offerings are absolutely the way to go. Favorite Pokemon and why? Aerodactyl, because for one thing, OG. For another, I absolutely love the fossil Pokemon. I was a paleontology major in college, and I used to run all fossil teams for the fun of it. And Aerodactyl is a wonderful addition in those sorts of teams for his versatility. So I think I already answered the college kids question. So, have you heard of Iron Widow by Shiran J. Zhao? I don't expect you have time to read it, but I think you will like it if you get around to it. I have not, but I will look it up. Let's see. When pouring libations, is there an amount that was usual? So that actually depends on the person. From what we can tell in ancient times, for an individual libation, it could be as few as just a few drops of wine for the average person. Because remember, wine was drank almost like water in ancient times. It was a lot safer because the alcohol sort of purified it. So that was like a little bit was sort of the option, and that's kind of the route that I take. I tend to pour just a small amount each for each libation for each god as I pray. But you can also do like larger whole glasses of wine, or like a larger amount for something like a holiday celebration, or if you want to offer a particularly large amount to make a large statement because there's something large you're asking for. So it really depends on what you're moved to do, but just know that it was valid in ancient times just to give a few drops of wine. Jacob, I already actually did that in a previous live stream, so go back through my old live streams and you can find me kind of describing that. What exactly are the gods or deity? So actually, Ocean Keltoy did a fantastic video that very much echoes my sentiments on what the deities are. The deities are disembodied minds that are awesome and powerful beyond measure, but distinctly unevolved and different from us. They have influence in the material world. We're not entirely sure how, though I have theories that are personal sort of UPG as to what I think that is. and they want relationships with us. So that is what I believe deity is. I don't know whether if they came into existence with the universe or whether they created it or had some sort of hand in shaping it. It doesn't really matter to me. They want relationships with us, and that's the most important thing to me because I see reciprocity and relationships as being the sort of core of religion. So let's see. I'm trying to look through for more questions. Let's see. Can I tell Athena to stop sending them you owl plushies whenever you leave the house? Orcus, unfortunately, I cannot. The gods do what they want to do. How do you respectfully go about discarding an offering after it's been on your altar for a while? That's a wonderful question. I covered this in my video on offerings, but I'll answer it again here. I personally, for libations, I will give a quick prayer to Cloacina, who is the goddess of drains, as I pour them down the drain and rinse out the libation vessel that I use. I've also, in the summertime, when it's not as rainy, I'll go pour them out into my garden. I scatter the ashes from my incense in my garden as well, though you can also wrap these things up and throw them away in the garbage. And that's what I do with the majority of my food offerings because at present our compost pile is a little overloaded. We haven't been using as much of the compost as we've been generating, so I haven't been burying things or anything out back, though burying is an option. If you have a burn pit, if you happen to be lucky enough to live in a place where you do, burning offerings is always a good thing. If you don't have burn bans and stuff in your area and you can do so safely, of course, don't go out there and just build one if you have like regulations and things. That's bad. But wrapping and things to keep them separate from the garbage, you could either put them in baggies or wrap them up in paper towels. The key is just distinguishing to make it clear that you are disposing of the physical object, but you are still recognizing the sacred nature of the fact that it was given to the gods. Do you have any thoughts on common monotheistic arguments for the existence of God? And do you think there is much pagan communities can learn from the history of Christian theological discourse? A lot of Christian theological discourse was kind of taken and from warped Neoplatonism. So I think that pagans actually have a richer history to draw upon ourselves. And I think that there's a lot more use that we can find in studying the theological resources of the various cultures from which we have drawn reconstructed practices. I think that it can be interesting to look at them at the very least so that we have arguments against them, but I'm not sure the monotheist arguments, a lot of them hinge on the necessity of a god for creation and the necessity of a god for morality, and I disagree with those arguments. So on the whole, the majority of monotheist arguments I don't find particularly useful. Is there a way to bless a necklace or an item for a deity? Like maybe how some people get cross necklaces blessed. I recently got a necklace as a gift and I wanted to dedicate it to Aphrodite. Sorry if bless isn't the proper word, but but I hope you understand what I was trying to get at. If you're asking if there's a way to dedicate a specific item to a deity, check out my video on votive offerings. That is what that would be. As far as something that you're going to continue to wear and use, there are actually histories of things like amulets and protective charms and things within Hellenic spaces. I know a lot of people are very anti-magic in the Hellenist community. I disagree with them. There was very much an indigenous magic tradition and still is in Greece. And so I don't practice magic myself, but if you're looking for that sort of thing, I am still doing research on it, but there are methodologies and such for that. And we're in ancient times, though those were largely handled by the temples. So I'm still looking into how all of that works. So if you're just talking about dedicating a sort of like a necklace as a votive offering, that is one way. Yes, you absolutely can offer that to Aphrodite, put it on your altar, don't use it for any sort of secular purpose. Again, it belongs to her. That is absolutely a possibility that you could do. All right, let's see. Did I miss a question from somebody somehow? Let's see. Any follow-ups, thoughts on non-alcoholic libations? Some gods do not accept alcoholic libations at all. For example, there was a prohibition on giving wine specifically to Demeter because she was said to only take libations of water. And some heroes were not given alcoholic libations as well for various reasons. When I start to cover specific heroes in the future, when I start to get into the 200 level topics as they were after I finish all my 101 stuff, I'll get into some of that. But yeah, non-alcoholic libations are absolutely acceptable, especially if you're underage. Like grape juice is an acceptable substitute for wine, and libations of other liquids were given in ancient times as well. So it is absolutely acceptable to give libations. Again, libations of milk and honey were fairly common in ancient times. There's also libations of water and such. Like I've talked about giving libations of water if you're in the broom closet or even if you're just out on a walk or something and you have a water bottle with you before you take a drink out of it, giving a libation of water to a deity to honor them is absolutely something you can do. So Gabriel, I do not give out my email publicly. However, if you are interested in submitting things that you want to share, there is an art section in the Discord server. Just feel free to join the Discord server and post it there. So let's see. The Pace for Polytheism is a good book for that, though I do disagree with some of the things in there later. Like they get into cosmological and a few other things that I'm just like, I'm kind of not all there on that. And there are some Platonist things in there that I don't fully agree with. But the definition for the deity, like for deity, I absolutely do agree with. So, what do you think of other gods from different pantheons? I believe that other gods from different pantheons more than likely exist. I just don't engage in reciprocity with them. I engage specifically in reciprocity with Haida deities and spirits, and I engage in reciprocity with Greek deities, spirits, and heroes. So, like, I believe that the vast majority of the gods that have been worshipped throughout history most likely do exist, but that doesn't mean I have to worship all of them. Let's see if did I miss a question? Let's see. How many recon related books do you own? Okay, I missed that. Sorry about that, Carp. Thank you for the $5 super chat. By recon related books, do you mean scholarly books that I use to draw on for my own recon, or do you mean books written by other people that are meant to be guides for recon? Because if you're talking about the latter, there aren't very many to own in the first place, though I do own quite a few devotionals from Bibliotheca Alexandrina. If you're talking about specifically for books that are like scholarly reference books, the answer to that question is yes. I own over 100 of them. So between this incredibly generous community, which you all know almost all of the books that I've been sent by you guys because I thank you guys at the beginning of my edited videos when I get sent new books. Between that and patron support and my own forays into purchasing things for just the money that I earn from my own work, I've managed to amass quite the library of reconstruction material. And I own even more on PDF from places like JSTOR. So yeah, I have over 100 scholarly books. So that's a lot. Do you have a stance on the Percy Jackson series? Are the gods bothered by how they're portrayed, or do they not care much? I personally think that the Percy Jackson series has done a lot towards renewing interest in Greek mythology, even if it's not the most accurate. This is the exact same that I feel about the webcomic Persephone. So, like, I personally think that deity related media, even if it's inaccurate in its portrayals, and some media, like, can be absolutely horrendous, like, think Gods of Egypt was awful. I think that it can generate interest in the ancient gods. And I think that if the gods had a problem with the way that they're portrayed in these things, I think that they generally would not allow such things to come into being. I've talked in the past about how I believe that the gods have a hand in all art as it's created. And so I think that there's something incredible about the fact that so much, like, that these beings are so interesting and their stories are so fascinating and the cultural remnants that we have are so engaging that even to the modern day, people are still creating stories and ideas and concepts out of these ancient sort of remnants that we have. And I think it stands testament to the power of the gods that these things do continue to happen. That isn't to say that deities that have lost a lot of honor in the modern day, or, you know, who somehow got skipped over due to, like, you know, errors in history and recording and such, are somehow less powerful. But I do think that it is a testament to just the engagement that humans get from story also, that these things keep happening. So I don't, like, a lot of people think that they're blasphemous. I don't necessarily think they're accurate to the way that the deities are, at least in my experience. But I don't necessarily think that it does direct harm so much as it helps engage curiosity. And I think that that's a positive. So I don't know if that's helpful as far as answering the question. But yeah, Gods of Egypt was awful. Don't watch Gods of Egypt. It was terrible. I am extraordinarily disappointed in somebody who was at one point one of my favorite directors. How long have you been walking your current spiritual path, and how did you get to this point in your beliefs? So I have been a Hellenist for, I want to say, between 4 and 5 years. I got to this point in my belief because I spent about 6 months trying to run away from the call and or prove myself crazy. It didn't work, and my life has only ever continued to get better the deeper into reconstruction I've gotten and the more of my time and energy I've devoted to the gods. As far as becoming a content creator, I did actually talk about the path to that in one of my previous live streams as well when I was chatting with Ocean Keltway, because he's one of the reasons why I am a content creator in the first place. He and Jen and a few other of my friends, including Wolf, and the folks from Divine Disbelief, who I don't work with as much anymore, but they were wonderful friends at the time. They all helped convince me not to leave the community after a really bad falling out with a prior creator that I used to work with. And, Ocean in particular really loved a lot of the takes that I had on Hellenism and my resourcefulness and my ability to sort of put together scripts and such. And so he really pushed me to, hey, the community needs you. You should do this. And I got a very strong message from the god that should be the case also, after a number of different circumstances led me to getting involved with the previous creator that I worked with in the first place. So that's kind of how I ended up here. I didn't originally intend to become a YouTuber at all, or even run a blog or anything. I was just kind of pushed into the community through a number of circumstances. But I'm grateful that I'm here. And I will say that running the channel has deepened my own appreciation for the Greek history. It's definitely pushed me to dive even deeper into original sourcing and into scholarly material. I would say that overall, the path that I've walked has immeasurably changed my life for the better, and the relationships that I've built with the gods, I would not trade them for anything in the world. So, how to improve your discernment for messages from the gods and improve prayer in general. So my video on prayer actually has a step-by-step guide for constructing historically, accurate prayers, like prayers that were done in the sort of tripartite style that we most often see written in ancient times. As far as improving discernment for messages for the gods, one of the big things that you can do is just learn how to really pay attention for these sorts of things, and learning to trust yourself when you have the sense that it might be a message from a deity, but understand also that to begin with, your interpretation might not be that accurate. Divinatory methods can really, really help, but I talked a little bit in my How to Go Deeper in Your Relationship with the Gods video and the stream on the same topic about discernment. There's not really a step-by-step guide to getting better at it, so much as keep practicing, keep worshiping, keep doing divination and other things, and over time you will learn how to trust yourself and how to hear, as it were, what is being said clearly, rather than allowing your own sort of concerns to get in the way. So let's see. I'm not really sure if there are there any more questions? Did I miss anybody's questions? So let's see. The explanation about the world is molded by belief. So the popular belief of the gods is the mythic one. So the gods would be their mythic versions. I'm not really sure, at what context that would be said in. So I think that might have been when I was explaining things. Let's see. I'm not sure. Are there any more questions? Did I miss anything still? Let's see. Do you study ancient Greek? And if you do you have a favorite resource or course? Yes, actually. I am studying Homeric and Attic Greek. And I have in the Hellenic Reconstruction resources for Reconstructionists section, I actually have a pinned PDF in there that lists the various courses that I've been using. There are 2 home courses that I really, really like, and I've been using them together. One of them is specifically a reading course on Homeric Greek. That's actually the title. There are 3 books in it. That one I would recommend. And the other one I'm trying to remember what the publisher is, but they have black covers, and it's specifically called Reading Greek. And that particular group comes with, if you purchase it, and I happen to have ripped my copy of the CD onto my computer because I do have a disk drive. I know, ancient, right? But I bought one. It's a Blu-ray drive into MP3 or MP4. No, it's MP3 files on my computer. It comes with a spoken course as well, where you can listen to how ancient Greek was said to have been pronounced in the reading materials. So a reading course they're blue and white covers. They're on Amazon. They're fairly inexpensive. I highly recommend that course. It's very, very thorough, and it has you working directly with the Iliad, especially the deeper in you get. So that, I think, is probably my strongest recommendation. And then the other one is I think it's called Reading Greek, and they're black covers. If you look up ancient Greek, course, you'll see them. There's 3 of them. And I highly recommend those as well. That one actually comes with an independent study guide that I think is really helpful. So let's see. Have you ever seen anyone mix philosophies like Confucianism with paganism? I mean, I think I've seen people do that with various Chinese indigenous traditions, but I'm not sure if I've ever actually seen anybody mix Confucianism with any reconstructed traditions that I know of. I know someone, I heard someone who's in Hellenism say that pagan gods don't necessarily love us in the way monotheistic religions are, because love is a human concept, but the gods just care a lot of us. That's a personal opinion. That also tends to be said a lot in Platonic circles. There's this idea that we only have relations with the gods rather than relationships. I at least somewhat disagree. I agree that the concept of love as humans consider it is a chemical reaction in the brain. And so a disembodied, unevolved mind would have a very different sort of affection towards us. And that is very much bared out by the mythology that we have. But the relationships that I have with my gods are very warm, in a sense that I would have a very hard time saying that some variation of love is not present. So I disagree that we have relations with the gods in the same way that you might have a relation with a river, which is something that I've seen said in circles. But it is probably true that the gods have a different quality of love that might be a little bit different than the way we experience it, because they don't have the physical apparatus that we do to experience those things. Are there any animistic or totemistic traditions within Hellenism? Animism actually is at least partially present within Hellenism. There are a lot of especially personified concepts, like Arete, who is virtue, or Arete, who is virtue. She is personified as a goddess, Nike, who is also a goddess of justice. There are a lot of personified systems and beings. There are gods of the various winds that are also personified winds. There are the gods of the Hesperides. There are gods related to various seasonal changes and such that are specific to those. So there are the gods who have many different aspects to them, and then there are gods that are seemingly rulers over and have very strong interest in personified concepts. So yes, there is some element of animism. Nymphs and other tree spirits and river spirits can also fall under that category. So yeah, there's a very animistic sort of bent to it. As far as totemism, that's a little bit more of a different thing. I dislike the term totems just in general, because it kind of oversimplifies a very complex and diverse set of concepts within indigenous traditions. So I'm not sure how to answer you there. Would you do any videos related to the holidays, any deity specific? You're wonderful too, Dr. Dino. Yes, actually, I do have more videos planned. I'm planning on doing one on Anthesteria, and I'm also planning on doing one in the future on Ganesia and related traditions. I'm also working on doing one on the Eleusinian mysteries and how little we know about them. So those are all things that I do have coming up in the works, and I do have more deity related videos in the works as well. I'm just trying to get as many of the 101 concepts done as I possibly can, because I want my work to be applicable to people who are trying to practice. That is my goal first and foremost, in addition to my allyship work. So there we go. Right on time. Also, welcome to Kelidorius and Tamasu. We're stronger together. Thank you so much, Akeda. So let's see. You said that you're one of the tribes here in the Americas. Can you ever find teachings from it flowing or influencing your Hellenistic beliefs, even though different? Well, I mean, you can't really separate yourself from your worldview. So the fact that I have the sort of holistic, reciprocal related worldview that I grew up with, that very much does stem from my indigenous upbringing, I can't separate that completely from myself. So in that way, probably, but I do try to keep the actual practices as separate as humanly possible. J.E. Bakley just sends hearts for $5. Thank you so much. Let's see. What would be the difference between relations and relationships in a platonic sense? There have been entire papers on that. I think that relationships are said to be reciprocal in the sense that gods and things interact back directly, whereas relations in this regard would be something closer to when you step into a river or have to cross it or have to change sort of the way that you relate into your world because of its existence. That is something more of relations. You might appreciate it, but the river might not directly appreciate you back. The gods in Platonism are said to be constantly suffused through and of everything. And so their constant expression is reality itself. It's extremely complicated. Like, trying to answer this question would take up a whole stream in and of itself. And I tried to start talking a little bit about the way that a lot of Platonists view things. But remember, there are also different branches of Neoplatonism, dependent on which of the various Neoplatonic philosophers get emphasized. Some favor Proclus, some favor Iamblichus, some favor Plato himself. And so it's very important to distinguish who you're talking about, what era you're talking about, and in what context. So the answer is as succinctly as I could have given it to you, but the answer is going to be different depending on the Platonist you're talking to. What system do I base my Greek pronunciation on? The system that I was taught as a part of a course that I took a while back, of specifically the academic pronunciation of Greek, which sometimes I get wrong because I'm only human, but it is based off of the Homeric academic pronunciation that I was taught. It's very similar to the system that's taught in the reading course for Homeric Greek. So let's see. Do you think gods of this pantheon or any other pantheon are just personification or spiritualization of a thing within nature? No. I believe that the gods are living beings, living in the sense that they are active and existent within the world, that they are disembodied minds, that they are beings that we can interact with. Absolutely. So let's see. Are Platonists polydeists? No. The Platonists don't tend to believe that the gods don't do anything in the world whatsoever. They just seem to think that as far as interacting directly with us, the gods don't need anything of us, which is most likely true. And that if they do love us, it's usually not as individuals, that we, loving the gods, get closer to the gods through worship, which improves us. So, Ikeda with the $5 super chat. Thank you for hanging out with us. Take care of yourself and get well. Thank you so much. And I'm actually, with that, I've actually been going for about an hour and I'm still not feeling particularly well. So I'm trying my best to do a little bit better. My stomach is still bothering me. I think I'm going to have to actually wrap the stream up for the night. I would highly suggest going and checking out the new server that we have set up, the new subreddit, and checking out the Discord server if you haven't already. I know that there was a few new folks that I saw in the live chat. Thank you guys so much. But I'm not feeling so well, and it sounds like somebody in my house has a guest over, so they might get a little bit loud. So I'm gonna go rest and lay down and wrap things up for the night. Thank you guys all so much for hanging out with me. There's still 47 of you here. Add any questions that you all are interested in, or any sort of commentary you have on the questions that I answered into the comment section if you get a chance. Try to hit that like button on your way out, even if it's the dislike, so you never see my face again. I really, really appreciate it. Rivers says, hope you feel better soon. Thank you so much. And I'm hoping to do another Q&A probably on Thursday, because unfortunately, due to stuff involving contractors and bids and such, I'm not going to be able to do an edited video this week. I do have the script mostly done, but I've got people coming in almost all week for bids on the basement. It's going to be busy. I've also got a bunch of work that I need to get done for the calendar project, and I'm behind on several of my commissions because of the flooding in the basement and everything else. So I'm trying to catch up on all of my obligations. It's going to be another week before an edited video, so I'm going to try to do another Q&A screen. If you have questions that didn't get answered, make sure that they make it into the comments or into the video discussion section of the Discord server. And as always, thank you all so much for joining me. Remember, we're stronger together.